So the most common question that I get asked at this time of year is, how should I be revising for my business studies exam? Especially if you've only got months until your exam takes place, you really want to make sure that you're making the best use of your time. So this video is all about how you should revise in the run up to your exam and time-saving techniques, etc., etc. First thing to understand is you are being assessed on 4 different things in business studies, and those are knowledge, application, analysis, and evaluation. So the way that you revise for each one of these is quite different. I'm just going to quickly explain what I mean by these 4 areas. So the first one, knowledge, is your definitions and your models, and you want to make sure that you understand these quite clearly. You don't have to, but I highly recommend starting every essay in your exam with a definition, especially for your shorter answer questions in business studies. If you don't start off with a definition, you can lose a lot of marks. So you really want to get your definitions sound. So knowledge includes your definitions, but also your knowledge of models. And the key thing with models is you've got to know what's on the X and Y axis and talk about that in your answer. So if we look at Ansoff's matrix, we're looking at risk, for instance, and you should be talking about risk throughout your answer. Application is all about how you apply what you are saying to a particular business or a particular industry. So why is it relevant to that business or industry? Analysis is your chains of argument. So this leads to, as a result, and you want contextual analysis. Again, what you're saying has to be relevant to the business or the industry that you're talking about. And then finally, evaluation is your ability to entertain multiple different ideas, even if they're opposing ideas, particularly if they're opposing ideas. And then also the ability to criticize your own arguments. So I'm going to talk you through how to revise for each one of these. Let's start off with knowledge. Knowledge, so the 2 things we're looking at are definitions and models. And the easiest way for you to revise these are to get some cue cards and on one side, label, for instance, the model or put the name of the definition that you should be learning. And then on the flip side, draw the model out or write out your definition. Okay, and I'm showing you some examples on the screen now. The key thing here is if you're going to have a model, you also need to try and revise a couple of bullet points of what it's trying to show. Because simply memorizing a model isn't enough. You need to know what it's trying to show, so that you can explain that to the examiner and really get those knowledge marks. I would definitely not spend a lot of time on making notes. And this might sound really strange, and a lot of my students are like, Miss, you don't want me to make notes. No, I want you to have had those notes during the year or the 2 years that you've been doing A-levels, but I don't want you to start making them now. It's not a good use of time. There are plenty of tools out there, Tutor2U being one of them, that if you find that you've got a gap in your notes, you can just download study notes or student notes from their website. Or you can watch a video and make some quick bullet points. But you should not be making really pretty notes at this stage. You haven't got the time. Maybe in year 12 you would have had the time if you're not sitting the AS, for instance. But you definitely shouldn't be doing that in year 13. Make sure you've got a copy of your spec. Go through each one of the bullet points in your spec and make sure you know what each one of those bullet points are. If you come across a term or something that you don't understand, a model that you don't remember, that's the time to go online, quickly watch a video and download any notes from there to make sure you've plugged in those gaps. The key difference between an A-star student and a C-grade student is the C-grade student is hoping for a good paper. The AA-star student, there is no good and bad paper because they know all of their topics and they'll be able to write about them. Secondly, application. How do you revise for application? Again, take your spec. Your spec is key here. Go through the spec and make sure you can list a business or a product that you would be able to talk about when it comes to each one of those kind of topic areas. So if you're looking at elasticity, have you got an example of an elastic and an inelastic product? Have you got an example when it comes to Ansoff's matrix of a business that has diversified, one that's done product development, one that's done market development, for instance? So you want to have as many examples written on the side of your spec as possible. Start identifying topics that you don't have any examples for, and then go and ask your teacher or Google them and make sure you can plug in those gaps. Application is also about how well you use your case study. The only way to do that is to read through as many case studies as you can and look at the questions that surround it and see if you're picking up on the right bits of evidence. So what you might want to do is try and get lots and lots of exam questions, for instance, with case studies, and think about the evidence and just bullet point the evidence that you would use or highlight the evidence that you would use. Are you picking up on the right evidence? So those are a couple of ways that you can revise for application. Analysis. This is where it all comes down to practice. And this is why I tell my students not to spend ages making notes. When it comes to analysis and evaluation, you've got to just practice. I use the PEAL structure in my essays and to teach my students. So PEAL stands for point, explain, evidence, impact, link back, and however, okay? And in the impact bit, I start getting my students, if they're not very good at analysis, I usually say have 5 chains of analysis. So you should have 5 sentences that say, therefore, as a result, this leads to, because of this, etc. So 5 chains of analysis that are linked to that question and that case study or that industry. If you then look at mark schemes, quite often they will have the chains of analysis that they want. So they'll check them against that, or they'll get their essay marked, etc. But have you got 5 points that you can make when it comes to analysis? Can you develop your argument in 5 different stages? Finally, evaluation. If you're practicing your evaluation, the best thing that you can do is, again, with practice questions, just briefly outline what your arguments are going to be and then start criticizing those arguments. Again, go back to your PEAL plan. And again, I'm showing you one here. You've got an exam question there. You've got briefly what my argument would be. And then I've started criticizing my argument. How do I go away and criticize it? If I can criticize it, the chances are I'll have a balanced mind to then write my conclusion, and it will be easier for me to say things like, this is what I recommend, but it all depends on this. So there are 4 areas: knowledge, application, analysis, and evaluation. I've briefly put on the screen how you should revise for each one of those. I'd love to get your feedback. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm an examiner and I'll be examining again this year. So anything that I learn or any new tips and tricks that I learn, I will be sharing them. Remember, the key thing is not to spend ages making really pretty notes, but just to get practicing and just to get to the point where you're jogging your memory constantly on models and definitions, etc., etc. And I've explained in this video how you can do that.